Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. This is going to be a fun time to share with you. It's going to be a webinar on helping you figure out why your to-do list gets bloated. And the idea of this webinar is to end with you figuring out how to end that to-do list bloat with emotional intelligence. I am Joel Erickson. I'm a life coaching physician, and I do this kind of work. I love to help people figure out how their thoughts and how there are things in their life that are just not working well for them, what of that is optional and what isn't. So let's get to work with this. So the first thing I always like to do when we're doing a talk is to give you some time to empty your brain. It's super important that you just have a place to park all of the stuff that's going around in your mind. And that's what I'd like you to do at the beginning here. I'd love it if you would just take some time to take a blank piece of paper like this and a piece of pencil and just write down whatever's on your mind right now. Just get it into writing on a piece of paper. And I know if you're listening to this, you're probably just going to want to keep playing. I would urge you to take the time to do this. You'll get 10 times the value from this webinar if you take the time to do the work. So I'm going to pause my talking for just a few seconds so you can pause the webinar and just empty out your brain. Hopefully you took a moment to pause this and emptied that out for whatever time it took you to do that. And now I just want to help you understand why I built this webinar. The reason I built this is the frustration that you or I or many of us may have around why do our to-do lists keep expanding and becoming bloated? Why do things get stuck on the to-do list and they just don't seem to ever want to come off? This stagnation, this feeling of just getting stuck. It might come from being overwhelmed by the amount of things you just have on your to-do list. It might come from feeling over-obligated. There's just so many things on that list. Or maybe a fear that if you actually did some of those things, you would be exposing maybe your imperfection. Maybe you're confused and you just don't know how to do some of this stuff. You just don't know how. Or you've got that nagging self-doubt that you're not good enough somehow to do the things that are on your list. What I want to show during this time is how I got into this. And that's going to start by a story I want to tell you. And what that looks like is I got these different pictures on this screen because they remind me of a couple of different moments in my life. One of them is a hallway in my university where I went, and I have this memory of walking down this hallway one of my sophomore year mornings and seeing a bunch of my classmates all sprawled out reading stuff, and thought it was a little weird because it wasn't typical for my classmates to be hanging out and studying here. And I finally found one of my friends that was in one of these big classes and said, "Hey, Steve, what's going on? Why is everybody here?" And he looked at me kind of and said, "Joe, don't even tell me that you didn't know there was a test today." That kind of just attention to detail was incredibly growing. I had a lot of potential for growth. But even farther in my life, back in residency, when I was with just kind of growing in my friendships and had a residency mate of mine who was getting married and invited me to the reception. And I had everything all organized. It was before the days of GPS, so I had to kind of figure out where this reception was. And I got there and I walked into the reception hall or the desk there and looking for anybody I recognized, didn't see anybody. And I went to the desk and asked the receptionist, "Hey, do you know where this wedding might be located or the party?" And she looked a little bit kind of quizzically and kind of looked at her date and flipped the page. And she looked up at me and said, "Sir, that was actually yesterday." So I tell you these stories not so much just to really give you hope and say, if I can start at that level, no matter where you're at, probably you are probably a little better at getting things down and keeping things. Now, I thankfully didn't stop there, and I continued in my journey of growth. And one of those ways was through reading other books of people. And this was a book written by Stephen Covey on 7 habits of highly effective people. And in this book, he started to help show me the way that we do things, that some of the things we're doing are very ineffective because they're not important and they're not urgent, and some things are very important, but they're not very urgent. And that was a really helpful, insightful thing to help me discover how I was spending my time. And then this book was incredibly helpful to me. It was a book that taught me the art of using better to-do lists, how to get things out of our mind and to get them onto a piece of paper and to get them down, drilled down to the very next action, the physical action that could be taken, and then how to use context to remind us of what to do. Very great ideas, and they didn't solve the problem that I'm addressing today, which is how does stuff get stuck on the list? Even though we might have some very good skills at creating the lists, how does stuff get stuck on those lists? So what I want to do is I want to show you that how this happens, beginning with the origin of the to-do list. So when our planning brain, our future-oriented brain, notices or desires or wants something better for our future, it's scanning the environment. It's picking up different options that are available to us. Options like invitations from other people to be involved, or requests from other people to do something, or just advertisements of something that might build our desire or build us in a way that we want to desire to grow. These are all just commitment options. They're optional things that we can commit to. They all begin with a thought of like, oh, I should, and then you can fill in the blank after that. What we need to do at that point is make a decision. And I thought this just is such a helpful way to understand decision. It's like incision is to cut something open. Decision is to cut away or to separate options. And really, if you think about it, when our brain notices a commitment option, there's only three things we can do with it at that moment. We can say, yes, do it now and get it done. Or no, never, goodbye, not going to keep it anywhere. Or no, not now, later maybe, but maybe. And most of the to-do work and teaching that I'm aware of focuses around what goes on this list and how to drill it down to that next action and how to use that context to remind us and trigger us to say, oh yeah, this is an option in this environment. Where I want to focus my energy is more on the no later list. And truly, that is the full entirety of the to-do list. You know, if we could do it now and get it done, it wouldn't end up on a list. And if we just said no, well, you wouldn't need a list for no things. So this really is the entirety of the to-do list, is this no, later, maybe list. And really, if you think about it, it's just a tool that humans have created in order to hold or allow us to consider the options in these different places, in these different spaces of time or energy or location. And what, of course, is the goal of a to-do list is to get done. And why would we want to get these done? Well, to move forward towards our desired future, or possibly get relief from some kind of expectation of ourselves or from another person. So what happens that these lists get bloated? Well, it seems that we don't decide no, never, goodbye, yet our internal resistance overpowers our commitment to take actions. Because this happens, our resistance overpowering our commitment, we actually prevent both decisions. We prevent the no, goodbye, or the yes, now, get it done. And instead, we continue to accumulate in our no, but later, maybe. So what I want to do after this is to show that the reason that we build this resistance, this feeling, is very often kind of unaware to us. We don't really notice the reason we feel resistance and choose the inaction. And sometimes if we notice the reason for the resistance, we don't like the reason that we're using. So here are some common feelings that may be associated with bloat on your to-do list. They may be reasons that you are using to say, no, not yet, to actions that you're future-oriented brain has said, yeah, this is pretty important. So one common one would be the feeling of overwhelm. There's just so much to do all at once. And this kind of feeling comes often from a thought like there's just so much to do. And it's a very kind of vague sort of thought and just a vague feeling like, oh, I just feel so overwhelmed. And that feeling leads to often inaction, avoiding. Another feeling that is common that can happen is the feeling of over obligated. Like we are just filled up. We do feel an attraction or a draw towards some future beneficial activity, but there's just very little space in our life for this kind of thing. And we just have all these obligations. We feel obligated and we just don't make any more time for future self type activities. Or how about self-doubt? Feeling kind of like, I'm not good enough. I'm not doing it right. And in this space, in this feeling, oftentimes we're going to overwork or underpublish because we're really fearful about putting ourselves out there. What if someone finds out that I'm not good enough because I don't believe I'm good enough? Or how about confusion? This classic, I don't know how. And when we say, I don't know how, and feel confused, we just pause and it freezes us from creative thinking and option building. Or how about this feeling of shame, guilt, anxiety? How about any negative feeling? I should be coming from thoughts of like, I should be better. I should be farther. I'm broken. I'm not as special as other people who can get this stuff done. Or just feelings of boredom. They often lead us to actions of distractions. So when we're living in these resistances, these patterns of thinking and feeling that don't promote action, we oftentimes are kind of unaware of them. We don't even know that that's what's happening. And being a good questioner of your thoughts and your feelings about why you're avoiding something can be really a helpful thing for yourself. And this is actually the heart and soul of what life coaching is. It's basically helping a client relieve unnecessary suffering. And we call it unnecessary because it's really optional. And it's optional because it's self-inflicted. It's coming from something that you actually have control over. And the most basic thing you have control over are your thoughts. So how are things decided to be optional or not optional, necessary? It's kind of like some pain in your life is necessary. For example, pain from growth of muscle might be a necessary thing to experience growth, or some pain is completely out of your control. You have no control over what your experience, what the circumstance is in your life, and that circumstance is pain. Where we can do work is in the areas that are optional pains, the thoughts that we're having about the circumstance or the thoughts that we're having about the pain. Oftentimes, awareness of the thought, feeling, and action sequence really brings a lot of empowerment to people. And so, what does this look like if we're moving back to these other feelings and thoughts that we've talked about? So the feeling of overwhelm, oftentimes, remember, that's coming from the sense that there's just so much to do. It's a very bland, broad brush. But what if we drilled that down to the very nitty gritty? Well, there's exactly 7 things to do. What if it all didn't have to be done immediately or today? What if it didn't all have to be done by you? This might lead to a different sensation, a different feeling of focused. And you might, from that feeling, begin to start taking some actions. Or how about looking at over obligated? I'm choosing, I just I have to do all these things. I can't do this other stuff. Very few of us, if we actually think of the reality of that, are truly 100% committed that if we don't do this, we'll lose our life. So at some base level, we are actually choosing to do the things that we're doing. We may have great reasons for making those choices, like providing for our families or whatever those important reasons are. And we do have to admit, we're still making a choice. So sometimes rephrasing it, instead of saying, I have to do this, which leaves us feeling over obligated, Sometimes we can say, I'm choosing to do this now. I'm choosing to do work now. I like my reasons for doing this now. Or maybe we learn to say, I'm making myself available to my future by saying no to this now. And when we do those statements and feel that might feel a power of empowered. And from that, we can take action. Or how about this self-doubt that we talked about? This, I'm really not good enough. What if I don't do it right? What if instead of telling ourselves all of those things and saying that in our head, what if we said, I'm willing to show up as myself for those people who need me? Or maybe doing it right is really doing it with mistakes. And that might lead us to a whole different sensation of courage. And from courage, we might take more action rather than avoid. And this confusion, remember, this is the one that I don't know how. And we learn that if we use that statement, if we say that, oftentimes that freezes our brain from thinking creatively. So what if we said instead, I might not know the how until I've done it. Maybe I just need to start something and see what I can do. Maybe what is the very next action that I need to take? Maybe getting it down to that lowest level can help get you past that I don't know how. And from these, you might generate a different feeling, perhaps a feeling of self-confidence. And from self-confidence, you can take action. Or what about just the broad, uncomfortable feelings that we all experience, the shames, the guilts, the anxieties, maybe the boredoms? And what if we had different thoughts about these and said to ourselves, well, my thoughts are the things that actually create these things. So if I can control those, maybe I can decide what I want to think. Or maybe we can say, these are real things that I'm feeling, and I don't want to change how I'm feeling. I just want to know that I can handle them and I can feel them all the way through, and they're not going to kill me. And from these different statements or sayings, you might feel more committed. Like, hey, I recognize I'm going to feel this way. That's normal brain thing, but I'm not going to stop today. And we can stop doing some of those buffering actions. So one of my life coach mentors gave this quote. She said, our thoughts determine how we experience our lives. That's worth kind of mulling over quite a bit. Our thoughts determine how we experience our lives. So what I want to do next is the big meat of this project, which is the to-do list activity. And in doing this, what I'm going to have you do is I want you to take that piece of paper that you wrote, maybe emptied your brain on, and try to use the blank side of the paper and fold it into thirds. I'm going to have you do your little art project, see how close you can get to making that line up just about 3 columns. If you don't want to mess with that, you can just draw 3 columns down in the middle. But make yourself a paper of thirds. And when you've been able to do that, you can pause if it's taking you a little bit of time. Hopefully, you'll be able to have this trifold of thirds. And then what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you start doing a to-do list. So on the very far, for me, it would be my left side of the page that I'm working on, my paper as it's laying down in front of me. I'd love you to begin to think about a to-do list and think about everything that you need to do or that you should be doing or that you want to do. And I'd love it if you would just pause the video and take some time to write everything you can think of down. I'm going to give 10-second pause here to just allow you to pause this video and take as much time as you need to write down what needs to go on this list. Hopefully you paused and restarted again. And now, with all of the items that are on this list, try to see if you can't drill down to the lowest next action. That's always helpful. That's a very important skill. Rather than keeping a broad action like planned birthday party, it might be something to the exact extent of find the number to call for the reception hall, something like that. Now, the next part of this is unique, and I don't know of anybody else that's doing this kind of work with a to-do list. And this is where I'm going to lean into your emotional brain, where I'm going to ask you to tell me how these different to-do lists feel for you. And what I'm going to ask you to do is use a sense of an urge or a sense of resistance when you look at each of these to-do lists. So an urge is something that you don't have to drill up any energy for. You just naturally get drawn to this. In fact, you might actually have to create some resistance to keep yourself from doing it. That's an urge. Something that is so intrinsic, so desirable that you just get at it and do it. Sometimes this is a good thing, sometimes it's not a very good thing, and I'll show you that in a bit. But if you feel urged to do it, put a positive in front of that task. If you feel a resistance, which means there's some drag, you don't really necessarily want to jump right into it, it's not the first activity you want to get done during the day, there's something you're feeling that's not driving you into this. There's definitely no urge, and you have to build energy up to do it. Then you put a minus behind it, and that I'm going to title resistance. Take enough time, pause the video, and then label each of those tasks with a positive or negative based on those definitions. Hopefully you've had a chance to label each of those actions, those to-dos that are on your list, with that energy that you feel towards them. Now, the third thing I want you to do with these tasks is I want you to ask yourself these questions. Do I see my desired future doing more of this activity? Do I see my desired future doing less of the activity? If you see your desired future doing more of the activity, I want you to put an F as in future in front of it. And if you see your desired future doing less of the activity, I want you to put a P as in past in front of it. Take enough time to label each of these things, asking yourself those questions. Hopefully, you have now asked yourself and gotten on your to-do list, this list of important actions, a energy and a future or past orientation. And this is where I want you to go to the other section of your paper. So the last two sides of your paper, the last two columns. And I'm diagramming on this whiteboard behind me how I would like you to begin to use your paper. So on the very top, I realize this is probably reverse or reverted in yours, but the top, you're going to write an F on. In the bottom, you're going to write a P on. So right in the middle of those two columns that you have, you're going to write an F on the top and a P on the bottom. And once you've done that, you're going to draw a line right through the middle of those two columns. So you'll get 4 quadrants. And what I want you to do is with each of your labeled to-dos on that to-do list, I want you to populate the quadrant. So if you've labeled your to-do as an F minus, it's going to go over in the F minus category, which means it's future oriented, but it takes energy. If it's in the F positive, it means it's future oriented, but it's urged. You just love doing it. You don't take much energy to get going. If it's a P minus, it's going to be down in this category or quadrant, and that's going to create past oriented, but it takes energy. And then down in this quadrant, it's past oriented, but it's an urge. So it's past facing and it's an urge. Take enough time to do that labeling now. And the reason I want you to put that all down before you move forward is I'm going to show you in the next slide how this all looks and why each of these quadrants is extremely important into emotional awareness of what's happening for you. So take the time. All right, hopefully you've taken the time to put your quadrants in and put the tasks in each of the quadrants. And now I'm going to show you how each of the quadrants actually are labeled so you can see a little bit better what's going on. So all of the tasks that fall into your F minus, they're future oriented, but they are energy, they take energy. These are going to be your momentum tasks. These are the things that are difficult to do, and you see, if you look in your future, you want and desire to be doing more and more of them. So oftentimes this might be on things that you're not really presently very good at. Maybe it's things that are more challenging, like eating healthier or exercising more regularly, or maybe it's a new skill that you're learning or a new relationship that you're trying to build on. And really the mantra in this category is something like, I'm doing this and I'm doing it sweaty and I'm doing it shaky. It's a very commitment is the driving energy often in this category. And then the F positive. This is the flow category, and this is the magical category because flow is a forward-facing, kind of future-facing action. You want to be doing more and more of it, and amazingly enough, it just creates more energy. It doesn't take energy from you. It like multiplies your energy. Oftentimes, actions in this category give you energy for actions that are needed in your momentum category. And then your P minus, your past oriented, things that you would like to do less of in your future, but take energy from you, those are really obligations. Those are going to be the things that are required of you because of past commitments, because of past choices, because of relationships that you want to continue and are requiring effort from you. These are things that we're often saying, I have to, but I would encourage you to say, I'm choosing to, especially if you like your reasons for why you're choosing these. And if you don't like your reasons for why you're choosing them, then you might want to reconsider how much of a commitment do you want to make to those obligations. And then this fourth category, the P positives, these are the past-oriented actions that are really urged. They're not something you have to build up an energy to do. And those are going to be your distractions. Those are the things that you might find yourself just doing hours of scrolling and like, what just happened? Or they might be the things that are just ways to buffer from getting into more important actions or obligations, like, getting up and doing something that you just know is not moving you into your future direction. Those are going to be kind of driven by this statement of, I shouldn't, but I am. So when you can find yourself and kind of figure out all of these different categories, it'll be help you to understand why and where you're putting your effort and your day in. So what I would encourage you to think about when you're looking at this now, after you've populated all of your quadrants, is what insights can you get from this? What area has the most to-dos for you? Where does it pile up? Where is the bloat occurring on your to-do list? And what thought, feeling, action sequences are you now aware of that might be causing the resistance or stagnation or avoidance of doing this? How might you separate from some of your obligations so that you can make more of yourself available to your momentum? Maybe there are some things that you're feeling obligated to do, and you don't like the reasons why you're obligated to that. What flow activities have you discovered? Things that actually create energy for you. And maybe how much are you actually scheduling time? How much are you valuing those activities now knowing that actually they build and create energy for your momentum actions? So my discovery has been that the main reason our to-do list bloats is because of how our thinking and feeling affects our deciding and acting. This is a really important aha for me. So recognizing that the bloat is happening because of how I think and feel and how that affects my deciding and acting. And so the question is, how do you end to-do list bloat? Well, it ends by noticing your feelings and thoughts around those actions that you've listed, and then seeing how they're serving you, how those thoughts and feelings are serving you to decide, yes, start now, done, or no, goodbye, never. These are just commitment options that your brain is offering because it wants better for your future or relief from something that you've committed to in the past. And this is a final consideration in this. What problem in your life, if resolved, would benefit many areas of your life? This is what life coaching serves to do. We want to look at problems in your life. We want to look at things that aren't working quite right for you. Maybe those are goals that you haven't hit. Maybe those are relationships where people you feel should be showing up differently. And how life coaching works is really just in 20-minute sessions where we work to uncover the thoughts, feelings, emotions, actions that are creating results in your life. You can get this done by reaching out to me through my email or through reaching out to the Gunderson Peer Coaching team if you're an employee at Gunderson Health System. So if you wish to have a experience just to say, how does this thing work? I would love to spend a 20-minute call with you, and you can reach me specifically if you wish to through this email at thelifecoachingdoctor@gmail.com. And that is where I would like to end. Thank you so much for being a part of this webinar. Thank you for all the things that you're working on, and would love to be a part of your plan or your strategy if you'd like to try seeing how your thoughts might contribute to ending the bloat on your to-do list. Thank you very much, everybody, for spending this time.